Top of the morning, everybody. It's good to have you here. You are watching The Sweat, presented by DraftKings. Jessie Coffield to my left, your right. Emerson Lotzia to her right, your left. Coming up, what our analysts think you should stuff inside your NBA and NHL lineups, which players, and best bets to chase for the last PGA Tour stop of the calendar year before the traditional holiday break.
All right, tons of football on tap as well. And speaking of that, our Week 11 Millionaire contests are live in the DK lobby, including our featured $3.5 million prize pool contest, which is just $20 to enter. Take your shot at that $1 million top prize and a seat to our Tournament of Champions live final. It takes place in January. And guess what? That's where you can compete for another $1 million. So let's take a look at who won a milli last week.
Well, hold on a second. Let's let this nice graphic breathe for just a moment, and that's a breath. Here's the Week 10 Milli Maker winning lineup, everybody. The low ownership players were absolutely clutch. Here it comes. Ramondre Stevenson, Hunter Henry, two dudes towards the bottom of the screen there at 4% or less ownership. Couple Patriots. The Eagles defense had a little scoop and score. 3.3% ownership. You got to love that. Stephon Diggs, CeeDee Lamb, top wide receivers, two of them who just went off. The Bills stack with Josh Allen at quarterback. Oh my God.
Okay.
Yes. All right, let's see which guys our panel thinks will go off this week, Jessie.
Yeah, good morning to
morning.
DraftKings contributors Piers Dietrich, Jeff Org, and Steve Buchanan. It's time for NFL Price Check.
Woo!
A first look at salaries for Week 11 Sunday slate. Who's worth his salary at quarterback, Steve?
Yeah, I think you got to roll with Dak Prescott this week at 7,200 going up against Kansas City Chiefs. This is a team that's allowing, the Chiefs we're talking about, an average of over 8 yards per pass attempt, and that's right in the realm where Dak Prescott is too as well. Not afraid to go downfield. Obviously, that connection with CeeDee Lamb has been electric. And this is somebody who's averaging 24 DraftKings fantasy points, and he's hardly doing anything with his legs. That's something we used to rely upon with Dak Prescott. He's hardly running the ball, and he's still doing everything through the air. So now he gets one of the worst secondaries in the league. Not talking about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but the Kansas City Chiefs, who just can't stop anybody at this point. This is expected to be one of the highest scoring games on the slate. So with that in mind, Dak Prescott is a great position to be one of the highest scoring quarterbacks on the slate.
All right, Jeff, when you're looking at these quarterback salaries, which one sticks out to you?
Oh, man. I think last week I said Cam Newton was irrelevant, wasn't going to be a big deal. Now I'm going to make him my pick.
Yeah.
That's pretty much the whirly dervish that is the NFL season this year. But Cam Newton at 5,100 is too cheap against Washington. This is a Washington team who's just bad. They don't have bad on defense. They don't have Chase Young. I know they won last week, but they've allowed the most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks by a wide margin this year. This is just a bad secondary. And do we even care if Cam can pass the ball? We already saw, obviously, what Matt Rule has in plans here. He wants to run the ball with Christian McCaffrey. He wants to run the ball with Cam Newton. It's a very good chance he finds the end zone. Again, this is a fast-paced Washington team. Doesn't really play defense without their best defensive player. Yeah, Cam is 100% in play at 5,100. Sorry, Cam, for what I said last time.
Okay, we'll make sure he gets that message.
Back.
Piers, quarterback, who do you like?
Jeff and I have done too many shows. I am also interested in Cam Newton this week at 5,100. Don't compare him to the top tier quarterbacks. Compare him to guys in this price range around that $5,000 mark. Who else is going to see the goal line work that he's going to get? None of the quarterbacks in this range. We know that Christian McCaffrey's always struggled as a goal line running back. He's not 100%. So you're going to get the rushing touchdowns from Cam Newton. You'll probably get some passing touchdowns. Again, people in this price range, they're not going to see the opportunity in the red zone and the goal line that Cam's going to get. Now, maybe they'll throw for 300 passing yards. Maybe that's really pushing it. So you might miss out on 2 or 3 air yard points, but he'll make up for that on the ground. I understand the fears of, well, he doesn't understand this system. Joe Brady has been a disaster as an offensive coordinator. He's supposed to be this whiz kid. It would be wise to just go ahead and blow this system up now and completely rebuild around Cam Newton and win now, because who knows how long Joe Brady and Matt Rule will be around if they can't win games. So I just give the keys over to Cam Newton and let him roll.
Okay, speaking of Cam Newton and the Panthers, his running back is one of 4 guys who are going to cost north of $8,000. So one of them going to be the guy you're going with here, Jeff, whose salary you like, or you got someone a little cheaper?
At running back.
At running back, sorry, what did I say?
You just didn't say
I didn't
any
say a position at all.
Yeah.
Yes,
But, I mean,
at running back.
When you said Christian McCaffrey, I kind of got where
just
you were
making
going.
sure-
I was
just
going to
making
pick
sure.
a tight end or something. Don't worry.
We don't know, Jeff. You do like to always go with your tight ends. So.
That's true. I mean, you never know with me. George Kittle had a nice game last night. Anyways, as we've seen with the running back position that we're talking about, running backs, the cheaper guys have really just been where it's at. I mean, we saw last week the winning millionaire lineup. We just had 3 guys, I believe, all under 6K. This is really where you need to attack. And I think David Montgomery coming back is in a really nice spot here at home. We saw the Chicago Bears put up a little bit of fight in their last game against Pittsburgh. Justin Fields started to come to life, and Montgomery was back, and it was clearly the David Montgomery show. This is the running back for the Chicago Bears when he's healthy. 15 touches coming off an injury. There was rumors that he might split carries and stuff. That's not going to happen. I love attacking Baltimore too. This is just not a good defense. You look at their metrics; they allow a lot of big plays. They're up there in terms of receptions allowed to running backs and stuff like that. So I think it's a great spot to deploy David Montgomery because the main thing is he's 5,500. This saves you a ton of cash. You can pay up for those big stud wide receivers, which have been way more consistent this year. And just keep with the theme of looking for cheap running backs in good spots.
Okay, is there a cheap running back in a good spot you like, Pierce?
There isn't. There's a couple guys on the board. Maybe we'll see some things clear up by the end of the week, but no one that I really want to take a risk on just yet. And I'll just pay it for Ezekiel Elliott in the spot against the 29th rush defense in Kansas City. We've got a really healthy 55 over-under on this game. We know Ezekiel Elliott will get the goal line work. Tyron Smith could be back in this game. And, if Dallas is wise, they're going to be a little bit more conservative and run the ball they're hoping that, Patrick Mahomes hasn't fixed his issues. Because if Mahomes is back, then you need to keep him out of rhythm. You got to keep the ball away from him, keep the ball on the ground, feed it to Ezekiel Elliott. You don't want to get into a shootout with Kansas City because then you end up passing too much. And you kind of play into not necessarily one of their strengths, but they're definitely better as a pass defense than they are a rush defense. So I think it would be wise to hammer with Ezekiel Elliott this week.
Steve, who are you rolling with at running back?
Yeah, Myles Gaskin is 5,700 going up against the worst run defense in the league. That's the New York Jets. They're allowing an average of 32.3 DraftKings fantasy points on the year. Like, it's been absolutely abysmal when this team is facing anybody that's going to run the ball against them. Obviously, the Dolphins are favored in this game. And, Myles Gaskin hasn't been overly productive, but you look at the carries he's getting here, 14, 20, 12, 15 over the past month or so. Like, if he's going to get that type of volume against the Jets, the points are going to come. So I feel like this is something you're getting that is really cheap and one of the best matchups of the season here. I know he's been a little spotty with the run blocking because he's not getting the blocks in front of him, but it's really not going to matter in this matchup because that's just how bad the Jets have been. 5,700, he has a chance to really go 4x on his value here.
All right, let's talk about wide receivers. Pierce, which guy's salary stands out to you?
Stefan Diggs at 7,900. I know it's expensive, but we saw the good Diggs last week against a bad defense. He's got another bad pass defense. Indianapolis is 26th in pass DVOA. They've allowed the third most points to receivers. And, they're a bit of don't break defense. They allow those underneath routes. Diggs is running about an ADOT of 11 yards. It's kind of that perfect spot to torch them. He had a really big game against them in the playoffs last year. It's a pass funnel defense, and Buffalo is basically a pass funnel offense. All they do is pass. I can see Diggs again repeating his performance from last week.
Steve, just under Diggs, you can get Deebo Samuel. He's facing the Jags.
Dude, chill out, bro.
Gross.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's a great spot for Deebo Samuel, but I'm looking at A.J. Brown in a bounce-back spot here. 2 straight weeks now. He's been under double-digit fantasy points. Last week, 1 catch on 4 targets for 16 yards. It was an abysmal game for A.J. Brown, who was at 7,800. But now he's going up against a Texans secondary that's allowing an average of 9.1 yards per target. That's one of the highest marks in the league. Julio Jones continues to be out. A.J. Brown is going to bounce back. This could be the week that he will do so. After burning everybody last week, the perception on Brown could not be lower going into this matchup. I think this is a great spot for him, and maybe, potentially, we'll see how it shakes out, some lower than usual ownership.
Jeff, what do we think? Which wide receiver are you rolling with?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with the Deebo Samuel call. I just feel like I'm a little bit more interested in George Kittle in that offense right now, but both of them could definitely go off next week. I think buying Jamar Chase here at 7,200, I think people are going to look at this matchup and go, oh, well, the Raiders defend the wide receiver position well, so we shouldn't play Jamar Chase this week. He's 7,200. But, I mean, this player's got 10 or more targets in 3 of his last 5 games. And, I mean, he's done it against good pass defenses. Like Green Bay defends the wide receiver position well. He went for 30 points against them. Baltimore supposedly does that too. He went for 30 points against them. Minnesota in week 1, he had a big game. I guess this is kind of just a player who his ceiling is matchup proof. He can go off against anyone. So I think buying in on Jamar Chase this week, who we'll see where the projections get later in the week and where we're talking about, but I don't think he's going to get as much heat as some of these other guys. I like buying on him if he's staying in the low 7K range.
Well, Jeff, I'm so happy you're here because, as Jessie has mentioned, the tight end position before, it is a position in which you really shine. So go ahead, just lead us off here. Whose salary really catches your eye? I'm sure it'll be a tight end 4 or 5.
So I'm just going to go with the guy who got 0 points last week. Let's do that.
Oh,
Let's go
wow.
with Mike Gesicki. Okay? I think this is actually a great spot to get back on Gesicki. Because realistically, how many tight ends are there outside of like Kelsey and Kittle this year who can get you 20-plus points? Gesicki has proven he is one of those guys. And, yeah, he went 0 for 7 in targets last week. I mean, I don't even know how you don't catch one pass when you get targeted 7 times, but he did it. But guess what, everybody? It's all sunshine and roses because he's facing the Jets this week. So I think this is a really good spot. Again, this is a tight end who's gotten really consistent targeting all year. He's probably going to bounce back with a big game at some point. And again, we have the Jets on here who don't defend anything well, no matter what Kenny Ducey says. So I actually like going back to him. He's going to have really low ownership because his price hasn't dropped at all. And he's just one of those players with very consistent 20-point upside.
All righty, Steven, tight end.
Yeah, you're going to get very excited here, but Dan Arnold at 4,100
Yes!
for the Jacksonville Jaguars. I mean, look, this is somebody who has 24 targets over the last 3 weeks, and he's still 4,100. Like, his salary has gone up $600 since last week, but over that span of the last 3 weeks, at least 60 receiving yards. Hasn't scored yet, which is a little maddening seeing how many targets he's getting, but that is going to come at some point. And some of those points that he got in some tough matchups against tight ends like the Bills and the Colts. Now he's going to match up against the 49ers, who not exactly an easy matchup, but if they're going to keep feeding him the ball, if I told you that someone has 24 targets over the last 3 weeks and he's under 5K, he's only 4,100, you'd probably be jumping all over that. So Dan Arnold, 4,100, that's a guy at tight end this week.
I love that. I absolutely love that. Jeff was pointing out last week how amazing Dan Arnold has been. Low-key, flying under the radar. Let's chill out. I can feel you rolling your eyes
He's been
over
like,
there.
okay.
Pierce, go ahead. Tell me how amazing Dan Arnold is.
Don't worry, though. I got us covered for the obscure tight end number 4. John Bates at 2,500. Ricky Seals-Jones went down last week. Bates played half the game, caught 3 of his 3 targets for 25 yards. Simply just a punt. But we know that Washington, I don't know if they necessarily love to throw to tight ends, but they throw to tight ends because there's no one to throw to outside of Terry McLaurin, and they can't complete passes. I mean, Heineke can't complete passes to McLaurin because Heineke is not accurate down the field. That's why we see these inflated tight end numbers from Logan Thomas, from Ricky Seals-Jones. We'll probably see another good week from John Bates if he gets on the field. You got to monitor the injury situation, but if you're looking for your tight end 4 punt of the week, it's going to be John Bates.
All right, guys.
That's it, huh?
That is a great A block.
That's
all
a great
right?
show. Great show, everyone.
Great show. Yeah, we'll see you next week. No, I'm just kidding. That was just the A block. We're going to be talking NBA next. But right now, Ross Tucker is going to break down some major shakeups in his top 10 power rankings on today's Ross Tucker Football Podcast. Let's take a look.
The Chiefs, number 10.
Uh-oh, Bri. They might be back. They're back. They might be back. That looked like the old Chiefs. That looked like the vintage Chiefs on Sunday night.
Number 9, the Patriots.
Uh-oh, Bri.
Are they back to
They're back. That looked like the early Tom Brady Patriots. Defense is playing really well. O-line's good. They run it well. Quarterback's not making mistakes. I think the Patriots, I mean, they be in the playoffs right now. They are firmly in the mix.
Number 8, the Los Angeles Rams.
They better get it turned around quicker. They're going to drop out of my top 10. Not impressed at all with them the last 2 weeks. They're not just losing, they're losing badly.
Number 7, the Baltimore Ravens.
So the issue with the Ravens is it feels like there's a book out on how to play them right now, and they haven't figured it out. They don't have a real good answer for these zero blitzes where the defense brings the house. They better get a solution, Greg Roman, quick.
Number 6, the Tampa Bay Bucks.
Well, they've lost 2 in a row. They had the bye in between. And I'll say this, I'm a fan of him personally and professionally. Not a big fan of how Tom Brady treated the media on Sunday. I think he should probably apologize to them. You know, to go up to the microphone and say, make it quick. Like, come on, dude. That bothered me.
Number 5, the Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah, that was, as impressive as the win was with Colt McCoy at the Niners, that's how bad this loss was at home against the Panthers. I mean, just a beatdown. They say that it will be up in the air whether or not Kyler Murray comes back next game. I kind of think he will. I mean, they made it sound like he might not even miss a game. Now he's already missed 2. He's going to miss a third game?
Number 4, the Bills.
Bills make you want to shout. Throw your hands up and shout. Lift your arms up and shout. Hey, 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 hey. You know, I don't really know the words to any of these songs. You ever notice that, Brian?
Yeah.
Stephon Diggs and the Buffalo Bills, they looked awesome against the Jets. I have a little bias towards the Bills. We know that. I hope that is a harbinger of things to come. Look it up, Bri. Real word. Harbinger of things to come that the Bills play that well.
Number 3, the Green Bay Packers.
So the Pack are going to be without Aaron Jones for a week or 2 with a sprained MCL, which is exactly why you have A.J. Dillon. Different style runner, but he's still very effective. He's obviously a monster. Really like the fact that A.J. Dillon will be available for the Packers while Aaron Jones is out. That's huge. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers wasn't quite himself against the Seahawks, but that defense has really gone to another level under Joe Barry.
Number 2, the Tennessee Titans.
What? Ross, you dropped them a spot even though they lost? Yes, I did. They had less than 200 yards of offense and less than 300 yards of offense. They find a way to win. They deserve credit for that. But I believe there's another team that if they played them in a series of 5 to 7 games right now, would beat them. That's what I think.
Russ's number 1 team, which is totally meaningless, but it's fun and will get many of you incredibly annoyed, is...
Number 1 this week, the Dallas Cowboys.
How about them Cowboys? Wow. You know, I think most weeks people don't get incredibly annoyed by who I have number 1 in my power rankings. But this week, people might actually get annoyed because they just got smoked by the Broncos 2 weeks ago. People don't like the Cowboys. I might actually get some negative feedback on this one. But they're pretty darn good on both sides of the ball. And I was thoroughly impressed by them against Atlanta on Sunday. I think the Broncos game was a blip on otherwise pretty shiny radar. I like the boys. I like the boys number 1.
Welcome back to The Sweat. We are now joined by a trio of DraftKings contributors. We got Nick Fryer, Kenny Ducey, and Gary Thorne here for NBA Building Blocks.
Yeah.
You guys know the drill. I need your favorite plays at the following positions for tonight's small 3-game NBA slate. Small.
Small.
Let's start with guard. Who are you going to be going with, Nick?
I'm going to go with Steph Curry tonight in the game against Brooklyn. I know he's the most expensive player there, but this is where I think you have to pay up tonight. I know there are some options at forward as well. And I know we got two teams that are very efficient on both ends of the floor. Look, I like James Harden in this game too for maybe a different reason that we'll talk about a little bit later. But when I look at Curry, he's getting obviously a ton of three-pointers up. We know that he's not shy about hoisting them up. But just the biggest difference with him and Harden and George too. I mean, you have with Harden, he's taken 66 more three-pointers than Harden this season, and he's done 60 more times than Paul George. And those are going to add up over time when you look at their fantasy point output averages on the season. You can see that it's made a big difference. And I know Curry averages, a little less rebounds and assists per game than Harden, but Harden also gets a lot of turnovers too. So I think Curry is going to be the best bang for your buck tonight. Where you have quite a few expensive players, you're going to have to go with one of them.
Kenny, which guard is the best bang for your buck?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Reggie Jackson at $6,100. This is his lowest price in 6 games. And this is a guy that is going to shoot the basketball. Nick just liked to talk about Steph Curry doesn't shy away from threes. How about Reggie Jackson not taking fewer than 16 shots in his last 8 games? He's played 34 or more in 6 of his last 8, so the minutes should be there. The Spurs, probably the worst defense on the slate. These are a bunch of great defenses playing tonight, a lot of low totals. But I think that Reggie Jackson ultimately in a pace-up game, both of these teams top 7 in pace. I think the minutes should be there, the shots should be there, probably the best defense to target. I think all the boxes are checked here. And I'm going to fire up Reggie Jackson. I'm going to take the discount at $6,100.
All right, Gary, and who are you going to fire up at guard?
Yeah, I'm actually going to split the difference between those two guys. And I think something Kenny said towards the end there is really important. These are low total games. These are good defenses. I think we're probably looking at a lot more floor performances than ceiling performances. So I'm going to hunt floor. And I think one of the best floor players in the entire NBA is Donovan Mitchell. He is $8,600 tonight. Across his last 8 games, he's averaging 47 DraftKings points per contest. He's got a usage rate above 35%. Within that span of time, and $8,600 is the lowest price tag we have gotten Donovan Mitchell at so far this season. So if you're going to get a couple $100 discount, again, I don't think he's someone who can match Steph Curry's ceiling, but I think he really does have one of the safest floors. So I'll go with Donovan Mitchell against the 76ers.
All right, so take me then to forward as we beef up the department here. Kenny.
I'm going to go with Tobias Harris at $8,500. I think that he is also a pretty high floor option. And look, I know that everyone probably fears the Utah Jazz defense, right? They have a great pedigree. They're one of the best last year. They've had some great performances this year. The Utah Jazz defense has been really bad in the last 5 games. And really, in particular, where they've been bad is in the lane. They've been terrible defending inside. Rudy Gobert has not stepped up. And look, Tobias Harris is a guy that's played a ton of minutes. He had a giant usage rate last time out. 36% against Indiana, where he had over 51 DraftKings fantasy points. Without Joel Embiid in the lineup, I think it's pretty clear that they want to get the ball into Tobias Harris's hands. And I think that if he drives inside or decides to post up, as he likes to do as well, he shouldn't meet too much resistance, in terms of the Jazz interior defense, the way they've been playing the last 5 games. Of course, something crazy could happen and the Jazz could just revert back to being a great defense. But you want to play the trends, you want to play the defense that we've seen over the last 2 weeks for the Utah Jazz. I think Tobias Harris is a really good option at $8,500. I just think you're going to get a lot of minutes, a lot of usage, and he's maybe going to have a decent matchup here. And also, Utah is not going to be a team that a lot of people want to go target, especially with a high-priced option. So maybe you also get a little bit lower ownership on Tobias Harris. I think that's a pretty good spot to play.
All right, Gare Bear, how about you, man? Forward, you like?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value in the 5K and 6K tiers with the Clippers. Kenny mentioned Reggie Jackson. I think Eric Bledsoe is a pretty good play as well. And then you've got Nick Batum, who's sitting right there at $5,000. He's not scoring nearly as much as he did to begin November. He was averaging 16.8 points per game across his first 5 starts in the month. But he's still playing a ton of minutes. He's had 35 minutes, 37 minutes in 2 of his last 3 games. He's someone who, if you remove a very outlier box score against the Timberwolves, it's a game he only played 19 minutes because it just got incredibly lopsided. If you take that game away, he's averaging over 30 DraftKings points per game so far in November. So at $5,000, I just think it's a really, really low price to pay for, again, someone who's not a ceiling player, but someone who is a floor player. And the other thing to note about this particular grouping is if Terrence Mann doesn't play in this game, he's questionable right now with an ankle issue. that's probably a few extra possessions for each one of those guys on the Clippers that I already named. So I think Batum is someone who could really pay off that price tag tonight.
All right, Nick, who would you build around at forward? You have 6 games to choose from on this slate.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to the Philly-Utah game. And I know with Philly, when you're looking at defensive efficiency, they're 22nd in the league right now in that category. So I want to get a little piece of that. And I know Garion was talking about Donovan Mitchell a little bit beforehand, and I do think that is a fair pick. But there's a reason why his price tag has dropped a little bit. I want to go with a guy who's shown a little bit of something recently. I know, we're talking 5K range. It's a little bit of flux. I'm going to go with Boyan Bogdanovic tonight, though. Coming off a game where he hoisted up 13 3-pointers, fourth 20-point game of the season. So I want to get a little bit of that, a little bit of savings. And at a time where, the Jazz scores, their efficiency is a little bit in flux all across the board. And I know Bogdanovic isn't necessarily an exception to that. But when I'm seeing him get a little bit extra volume recently, especially from 3, where again those makes are gonna add up from a fantasy perspective. I'm gonna go with him tonight against a team that's not quite as efficient defensively.
All right, Gary, and let's talk centers. Joel Embiid was the highest priced guy at 10,100. He's out. So Andre Drummond, the next guy up at 8,700. Are you going to pay up at center?
I mean, if you're looking to pay up at center, it's essentially a decision between Gobert and Drummond. And I think for me, I would just rather save the $1,000 and go with Rudy Gobert. Drummond probably has a little higher ceiling. At least he's flashed a higher ceiling so far this season. But I think it's important to note that he was at his most dominant when Tobias Harris was also in the NBA's health and safety protocols. Since Harris has come back and he's kind of touted this massive 34-35% usage rate, Drummond's production is tapered off. It's only a 2-game sample, but it's a pretty noticeable trend. So I think Gobert for $1,000 less. Also, you think about this direct matchup. I mean, Gobert is the much better individual defender. I just think that he can take advantage of Drummond more than Drummond can take advantage of him. So I'll save the money and just go with Gobert.
All right, are you going to save money at center, Nick?
I think that there are some other options that you can go with tonight, but I'm with Gary on this one. You got to go with Rudy Gobert, especially with Drummond. The price is not, it's not worth it. Spend that extra grand in this game. And when you look at the times they've played each other over the past few years too, 5 of the last 7 games, Gobert has had more rebounds. 4 of the last 7 times that they've met up, Gobert has scored more points too. And again, when you're talking about defense, it's not even close when it's Drummond versus Gobert. But again, with the 76ers in general, not as efficient defensively too. So I think here it's worth paying up for Gobert. And I think with Drummond, if Harris was still out, that might make a difference. But either way, in the end, the savings is too much. And but Gobert will give you something at least in the end.
All right, Kenny, your pick for center.
I'm actually going to talk about this in a sec, but over the last 5 games, I mentioned the Utah Jazz defense is really bad. They've actually allowed over 70% shooting inside the restricted area. I'm a little worried about fading both of these guys, but I'm also incredibly worried about Rudy Gobert's defense inside against Andre Drummond. I know it's a crazy thing to say. I actually do like Andre Drummond. The problem is $8,700 is a really high price to pay for him. His price has just continued to come up to the point where now it's like maybe he hits 5x salary. I'm just going to go ahead and save the money. I'm going to go with Thad Young at $5,300. He's hit 6x value in 4 of his last 6 games. Sorry for throwing the producers a curveball there, but he's played at least 23.5 minutes in 5 straight games. The matchup is not the best, right? But we know that he's talented. We know that he can score the basketball. And he's just been one of the most consistent performers on this slate in terms of minutes that he's getting and fantasy output. I just think, in general, if he has the ball in his hands, he's on the floor for 27, 28 minutes, he should be able to get you 20, 25 fantasy points. And I think that's really all you can really ask for at this position.
All right, let's go to value, shall we? You want to save everybody out there watching some cash here. Nick, hook us up.
So there are 2 guys that really stand out to me tonight, one in the Utah game and one in the Golden State game, but on the opposite sides of the sideline. So I'm going with George Niang at 4.1K versus Utah. I know we're talking about Tobias Harris and him coming back, and of course he is going to give you more upside. Obviously, it's probably more expensive, and he has cut into George Niang's minutes a little bit, and then of course his usage and everything. But this is one of those revenge games we talk about all the time with the NBA. So for George Niang, he was with that team for the last 4 years. He's shown the Sixers a lot. He's still getting right around like 25 minutes of games with them with Tobias Harris back. So I'm going to go with him because I think that again with that little price tag at 4.1K, you can get something out of him in this game. And then the other one too is Patty Mills real quickly. I mean, with Joe Harris out tonight, Patty Mills just hoisted up 12 3-pointers the other night and obviously had a good night. I think this is a guy at 3.8K you got to take a flyer on, get some exposure to.
All right, Kenny, how about a value play for your building block?
I'm taking a shot on Doug McDermott at $3,600. Both these teams top 7 in pace, and while the Clippers defense is really good, they're second in defensive efficiency. They've been middle of the road against the three, around 34% shooting for opponents. I think that ultimately McDermott here is a great flyer. You know, he could hit a few threes, 3 or 4 threes in a pace-up game. I think that this could hit. Also, I love the Bledsoe, Eric Bledsoe. $5,200. Gary mentioned him earlier, but I think that's an incredible value play. He's been so consistent, and he's gotten the usage, especially in the last 2 games. He's seen a lot of minutes and a lot of usage, so I like him as well.
All right, if you're going to build around a value play, Gary, and who would you choose?
Yeah, they've both already been mentioned, but I think Patty Mills is kind of one end of the spectrum and Doug McDermott is sort of the other end of the spectrum. Mills is going to be chalky, just because everyone saw him get 9 3-pointers in the absence of Joe Harris. Not that there's anything wrong with that. This is a small slate. You might not even have to worry all that much about chalk. But Mills is going to be popular, I think rightfully so, and I will have some exposure to him, especially if he's going to play more than 30 minutes in this game. But McDermott's really interesting because you have this trio of Spurs wings priced below $5,000. I think a lot of people are going to trend towards Vassell, who's been fantastic lately and has been getting the most minutes of that sort of like McDermott, Lonnie Walker caliber of player. But McDermott's also probably locked into somewhere between 25 to 30 minutes, and he has the potential, as Kenny mentioned, to really just hit 4 or 5 3-pointers. So I think McDermott might be a value play with a lot less ownership, especially directly compared to someone like Patty Mills.
All right, good stuff. Let's talk about Slate Approved. What is your favorite bet on the DK Sportsbook tonight? Kenny, what is it?
It's going to be Sixers plus 9.5. I touched on the issues that the Jazz have inside. Over 70% shooting for opponents in the restricted area. Terrible rebound in the basketball. I think Tobias Harris and Andre Drummond can really do some damage to a defense that's been really bad lately. And I think this could be a close game.
Gary, and your favorite bet, what is it?
Yeah, I'm going to take advantage of some of these prop specials we have for this Nets Golden State Warriors game. I'm going to go Harden over 25 points, over 10 assists at plus 425. Obviously, that's something in terms of the scoring that Harden's only done 3 times so far this season, but 2 of those times have come in his last 5 games. He's looking a little bit more comfortable as he's sort of rounding into shape. Keyword rounding. And I also just think that this is going to be a close game. I mean, if you look at just the box scores of the Nets' recent games, they're either winning or losing by 25 points. I think this contest stays close. I think Harden plays his full allotment of minutes, and he'll just get over those 25 points. I really don't think there's any concern about him getting 10 assists. So at plus 425, I think there's some nice value here.
All right, Nick, where are you going for your favorite bet?
I'm absolutely in lockstep with Gary on this one. I was actually looking at it from just the points assist combo at 31.5, but I think you're going to get that much better value going with the special that Gary was talking about. With Harris out, there's going to be shots on the table, and as much as I think Patty Mills is going to benefit from that, I think Harden's going to do the same as well, and also he's going to still be dishing out a ton of assists. So I think 31.5 assists points combo is a safer way to go, but I think bang for your buck, you got to go with what Gary is saying here for the 25 points and 10 assists.
All right, guys, that's it. Appreciate you hanging out with us, helping us build those NBA lineups. All right, coming up now, Johnny Avello, as he does every week. He joins Steve Buchanan and Julian Edlow on the Unreasonable Odds podcast. I always forget the name of that. I have no idea. I don't know why. I've tossed to it like 1,000 times, and I'm always forgetting about it. I should look at the prompter. All right, so they break down the underdogs here, thriving in the last couple weeks, and how they have shaken up the odds on the DK Sportsbook.
Wow.
Prior to the Jets beating the Bengals on Halloween, no underdog of a touchdown or more had won a game outright in the NFL this season. Since then, there have been 8 teams that were favored by 7 or more, I believe, that have lost a game. It has been madness. So with a start like that, where kind of all the chalk comes through on the money line parlays, the teasers, was regression like this expected, or is this one of the wildest, runs of upsets that you can remember in the NFL, Johnny? Because we're newer. I don't remember this much chalk busting up in the last few weeks after it just was not happening to start the season.
Yeah, it's been a pretty good stretch happening here, but let's just say that we had some catching up to do because we didn't have that happen during the beginning of the season, and it is things that do happen regularly during the season. You said wild stretch. I'll go along with that, Julian. Wild stretch.
All right.
Yeah, it's been absolute madness too, and it's been madness for NFL road dogs of 7 or fewer points who are an insane 43-15 against the spread on the season, cashing at 74%. Johnny's already shaking his head. That trend went.
That number, by the way, the 43-15 was going into yesterday.
That's insane. Yeah, that's
so then.
Wild.
You got the numbers for yesterday too.
Yeah, that trend went 4-2 on Sunday. If we count the Eagles, who closed at a pick'em, but they were a dog all week long. Vikings, Saints, and Lions also covered, while the Patriots and Packers got big home wins to go against the trend. Does that 47-14 against the spread record for short road dogs speak of the lack of home field advantage we're seeing in the NFL? Because when road dogs are crushing like this, does it factor into giving the team fewer points on the road?
I don't know, Steve. I don't believe the home field has become less of a, of a factor, so to speak. I just feel it comes down to that we have some of these teams overpriced, as odds makers. It's our fault, but the bettors still believe that the pricing is correct. So there's no reason to modify drastically. So we'll just keep going the way we are. Now, once the players start betting the one other way, which I don't believe will happen because they never have in the history of the NFL, then I guess we'll just keep doing what we're doing. But, my feelings are always that these trends turn around eventually, and that's what I think you'll see happen.
That answers my follow-up. I was going to ask you, do you see this one going the other way, just like the heavy favorites kind of went the other way over the last few weeks? But you already cleared that one up for us. So going specifically to Sunday, what outcomes were some of the biggest winners and losers for the books? Because kind of going back to that first question, I'm sure, outright losses for the Ravens, the Bucks, even the Cardinals, even though they, Murray and Hopkins ruled out, but they were still around a touchdown when it closed. So what were some of the biggest winners and losers for the books, and how did those heavy favorites break up the parlays and teasers?
Well, yeah, the Bucks were the biggest decision for us. Now, the Bucks were the biggest handle, tons of money on the money line, had them cooked up in money line parlays, teasers, every other type of bet. And of course, that Thursday night game was good for our house. The one with the Ravens, that line moved from 6.5 to 8.5. And then the Saints covering, but there was no win there. That was another one of our big wins, along with the Eagles, the Lions, which it was a tie, and the Panthers. That also blew up some other of those exotic wagers. So those were the games that, really turned us into a magnificent Sunday.
All right, we got some hockey games on the menu tonight. We got a couple dudes here to talk about it. It's our NHL panel, RotoWire's Paul Bruno, and the host of the NHL Fantasy on Ice podcast, Pete Jensen. It's opening face-off. We love this segment. An 11-game NHL slate. So you guys help us out with your favorite DFS plays tonight.
Yeah, Paul, what is your favorite play going to be at center?
Jesse, I'm going to fade a few of the bigger names because of the quality of their opposition. When you consider McDavid and Draisaitl in Winnipeg, they face the Jets and Connor Hellebuck, one of the best goalies in the hockey. The Leafs host the defensive-minded Preds and Juicy Saros, so that negates a little bit of Tavares and Matthews' value. Barkov hosting the physical, tight-checking Penguins. Islanders, I say no thanks. Those are tough matchups for those Stars. So once I get past them, I land on Mika Zibanejad of the Rangers, who faces a disheveled Montreal club. Oh boy, do I love saying that. That has to be one of the longest injury lists of any team in the league. And they may be forced to play their third-string goalie against a guy who has 8 points in his last 10 games. I'll gladly pay the $7,300 to see Zibanejad take a bite out of the Habs tonight.
All right, where are you going to be rolling for your favorite play at center, Pete?
I definitely agree with Paul about getting either Zibanejad or Panarin into your lineup for this favorable matchup for the Rangers against the Habs. That said, I think there's some value here in recently returning Kevin Hayes from the Philadelphia Flyers. And I just like the price point in DraftKings, $3,900. He came back, had an assist on the power play in his season debut for the Flyers, who have been kind of like hot and cold. They win, then they lose, then they win again. So it's like, I think that they have a good potential here against the Calgary Flames at home. He's on the second line in a spot that Derek Brassard was really productive in, with Cam Atkinson and Joel Farabee, 2 goal-scoring wings on his side at even strength. So I think a good chance that second line or second power play gets going here for the Flyers, who are a sneaky team on any given night. And Kevin Hayes, one of their best two-way players, is now back in the equation. So I like Kevin Hayes as a value play at center.
What about at wing, Pete? Who's your favorite play there?
I mean, I like Andrew Mangiapane for the Calgary Flames in that same game. Obviously, I mentioned Artemi Panarin. Can't go wrong there. I have him in my mock DFS lineup as my spend up for wing. I also have Troy Terry, because why wouldn't I have Troy Terry or anybody else right now? He's on a 14-game point streak, but that's obvious at this point. He's the breakout player of the young NHL season so far. But Mangiapane, 10 goals in 15 games. That's top 10 in the league right now. I mean, I think Mangiapane is leading the Calgary Flames in goals so far. He's now no longer playing on the third line. He's on the second line with Sean Monahan. So I think that's a good spot for him. And I just think that most people in the larger scheme of things in the NHL this year don't realize that Mangiapane is one of the best goal scorers in the league. 3 goals on 10 shots in his past 4 games and tied for 6th in the NHL. So I'm rolling with the bread eater, Mangiapane.
Now, speaking of bread, Alex Ovechkin, Paul, $9,000, $1,000 more than the next guy.
Well, you know what? And one of the next guys is Willie Nylander of the Maple Leafs for $8,000. And speaking of Ovechkin, Willie Nylander is the most prolific shot maker next to Ovi in the entire league, and for my money has been the most consistent Leaf forward this season. He does get the tough matchup against the Preds that I talked about before, but since he's scheduled to line up on Toronto's second scoring line with Tavares, he'll likely avoid the top checking options of the Preds, and they'll be focused on Matthews and Marner, of course. I say take Slick Willie, with the reminder that he's featured on this club's potent power play, surrounded by the rest of the club's big 4 forwards.
All right, Paul, take us to the blue line. What's your favorite play at defense?
You know, while I'm tempted, Jesse, to go with Brent Burns because he's the most productive blue liner on the board, averaging 14.7 DraftKings points per game, I see a stack of opportunity for the Rangers that Pete and I have both touched on, following up on the injury reference that I made earlier. In fact, I gladly pay $7,200 to get Adam Fox, the Broadway Blue Shirts power play quarterback and big minute eater on the blue line, logging almost 25 minutes a game. That means he'll have a say in lots of Rangers scoring opportunities tonight.
Pete, which defender catches your fancy?
I definitely think it's a night to stack the New York Rangers. Can't argue against that one, but can argue about the price a little bit. If Montreal keeps that lower scoring, even in a loss, that you could see maybe not worth spending up for at over $7,000. In my normal strategies for defensemen, I usually don't spend up. I try to find some value. So I'm going with Shane Gostisbehere. Will probably have a low roster percentage when you consider the Coyotes are the single worst team in the NHL this season. But he has 12 points in 15 games. He's their leading scorer by far. Talk about bounce back city right now for Gostisbehere, who used to run the Flyers power play back in the day with all that talent, but is making the most of his opportunity here for a bottom dweller. And yeah, Shane Gostisbehere inside the top 10 among scoring at the defenseman position. Who could have ever imagined that would be the case? And for $4,500, I would take that any day of the week. So I got Gostisbehere as one of my top 2 defensemen for the upcoming slate.
Hey, Pete, what about net, man? Do you have a favorite play there?
I will go with the Minnesota Wild goaltender at home against the San Jose Sharks, whoever it ends up being. You look at Kaapo Kähkönen, he's won consecutive games, has been efficient in that stretch for Minnesota. He's still rookie eligible, so watch out for him in all fantasy formats. But then Cam Talbot as well has a great record this year. I think he's one of the steadiest options in the league in terms of experienced goaltenders with a strong defense in front of him. Matt Dumba's having a great year. There's Jared Spurgeon, Goligoski. They have a loaded defense even after they parted ways with Ryan Suter and bought out his contract. Minnesota's defense is strong as ever. They're near the top of the Central Division with the slow start for the Avalanche. And I just think that the Minnesota goalie against kind of like a flailing Sharks team, the Sharks are coming back down to earth right now. The other two California teams I trust a little bit more in the LA Kings and the Anaheim Ducks. So I will go with the safe bet in Cam Talbot at home against the Sharks.
Paul, who are you considering in the crease?
I've got three choices, and one of them's obvious. We've been hammering on the Rangers-Montreal tilt, so why wouldn't you consider adding Shesterkin to the mix? He's got a 241 goals against. He's 7-2-1 in his last 10 starts, and this is obviously a very high win probability that Pete and I suggest for the Rangers tonight. Speaking of high win probability, though, catching the Islanders on the second of back-to-backs, it could be a good night to look at spending up for the Florida tandem, whichever one of those guys starts, Spencer Knight or Sergei Bobrovsky. They're both $7,900. So check back to the RotoWire starting goalie grid a little bit later to get the right guy in the nets. A third option, similarly unidentified at the moment, is whoever's facing the visiting Coyotes. That's kind of the free spot on the bingo card this year, it looks like. So for this mismatch, we wait to hear if it's going to be Jordan Binnington or Billy Husso at the top of the DraftKings price board for $8,500.
All right, before we let you go, let's get your favorite value play, Paul.
There are a number of competitive matchups tonight, Jesse. So once the Leafs dispatch the Preds, he said, hopefully, there'll be plenty of channel surfing at the Bruno household, focusing on the later starts. Those should all be competitive games. My value plays among them are betting the over on the alternate total goal line in the Islanders-Panthers game, where the potent Panthers attack proves too much for the weary visitors and leads me to take the over. 6.5 bet for a 140 payoff. And the game that I'm really looking forward to on the later part of the slate is a Caps visit to Anaheim. We've touched on Ovechkin's scoring binge since the start of the year, and despite some key injuries, the Caps are right there at the top of the league almost with 3.6 goals per game, ranking third, and right behind them are the Ducks in fourth with 3.56 goals per game, which is a nice surprise for their fans who haven't seen this kind of offense from this team in several years. This meeting of the two great offensive clubs should result in lots of scoring opportunities for both teams. So I'll go back to the alternate total goals prop to take the over 6.5 total for a 125 payoff.
All right, Pete, where are you looking for value?
I like what the Anaheim Ducks are bringing as far as their scoring depth, but another team on the slate that I like even more from an offensive depth standpoint is the St. Louis Blues. And I would just say anybody building a DFS lineup tonight, certainly consider whether it's Jordan Kyrou for 4,800, Pavel Buchnevich recently playing on the top line for 4,300, or if you're going bargain bin hunting, keep a close eye on Scott Perunovich, who could make his NHL debut after being recalled from Springfield of the AHL, where he was leading that league in scoring as a defenseman, tied for the league lead in the AHL with 20 points in 12 games, also a former Hobey Baker winner from 2 seasons ago at Minnesota Duluth. If he's in the lineup, you know the recent track record. Paul mentioned Adam Fox earlier, college defenseman. Cale Makar, college stud defenseman. This could be the next guy. He could never be sent back if he makes an immediate impact. So keep a close eye. Scott Perunovich, bare minimum price, $2,500 in DraftKings.
All right, speaking of studs, you two are done. Appreciate the help on this Tuesday morning. We have one more block to go. We have one more break to go. When we return, so does Jeff Ulrich. We're talking best bets on the DK Sportsbook for the final PGA Tour event of the calendar year.
It's a one-man PGA panel right now. DraftKings contributor Jeff Ulrich is here for PGA Tour High or Low. Jeff, you know the drill. Are the following golfers' odds too high, aka too long, or too low, aka too short, for this week's RSM Classic from St. Simons?
Yeah, nailed it. It's
Island,
it's beautiful. You would actually love it. A lot of like Spanish moss Old history. It's like when they stepped off the boat, like that's what they were looking at, was
Sounds
like huge oak
humid.
trees and the beaches and stuff.
Sounds humid.
Really good food down there too. Great golf course as well. Scottie doesn't know Scheffler, plus 1,000. What do you think? Too high or too low here, dude? T2 last week, don't forget that, including a low 62.
Sorry, I'm just still recovering from that great advertisement for St. Simon's.
Yeah, wow.
Fantastic sell job. Look, Scottie Scheffler, definitely the deserving favorite coming in. Emerson mentioned 2 top 5s in a row. He really did kind of blow it last week. I mean, he had the lead going into the back 9. It looked like he might just cruise, and then the wheels fell off. Jason Kokrak got hot, and he wasn't even contention at the end. This is a really good young player. I don't think that he deserves to be plus 1,000 at this course. This is an event and a course where it's a shorter setup. What you do off the tee here doesn't really matter, and it brings all these veteran players in. We've seen guys like Kevin Kisner just come in here and just gain like 8 strokes putting. And Webb Simpson does this every year, and you just don't necessarily need to have that power off the tee that Scottie Scheffler has. So Scottie Scheffler's playing well. He's probably got a sharp enough short game and a good enough putter right now to contend, but I don't really think he deserves to be plus 1,000 in this field. I'm not sure if anyone deserves to be that price. So definitely looking a little bit too low here. Player with a lot of momentum, good form, but not for me in betting.
All right, Jeff, how about Louis Oosthuizen? He's plus 1,600. First appearance since CJ Cup a month ago.
Oh, God,
Yeah.
Jeff.
I mean, in all seriousness, this is a better fit for Louis than it is for Scottie Scheffler. I mean, he's a veteran player. He's one of the top putters on tour. I believe he wasn't first in strokes gained putting last year. He was top 3. So, again, this is the kind of player you like. He's also got a very creative short game. It's the strength of his game, right? Now, he hasn't played much in the fall. This is why I'd say his odds are too short here, too. Typically, what we see in these fall series events, we see players who play 4 or 5 times, and then they come to this event, and they just kind of break through. It happened with Robert Streb last year. He didn't even play that good, but he had played 5 times previous. So, Louis, all things considered, I do like this setup. It wouldn't shock me if he got hot with the putter this week. We're also expecting a little bit of bad weather. Louis loves the bad conditions. The tougher it is, the better he plays. But plus 1,600, I'd rather see him in the plus 2,000 range. Maybe he drifts before tee off, or maybe you get him in play. I do kind of like him this week in all seriousness, but I just feel like his odds just a tiny bit too low for me to really get behind here.
Yo, hook me up with Joaquin Niemann here. Plus 3,500, dude. Yeah. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on, dude. He bogeyed 3 of his final 5 holes last week and missed the cut entirely at Houston.
It's really impressive. It sounds like how I end out my rounds, except instead of bogeying, it's double bogeys.
Yeah.
I think plus 3,500. This is where we're getting into the fair range, and this is a player I definitely don't mind targeting. Again, we're getting lower sentiment, right? I mean, obviously he bogeyed, he missed the cut. People were kind of high on him last week, but he's a very accurate player. He's done well on these courses. Like he's T2 at the Sony Open at Wahaili, another very old classic par 70 course. We see a lot of correlation. Guys like Kuchar, Webb Simpson, they do well at the Sony Open. They come and do well here. I think Niemann's all kind of good odds there at plus 3,500. I think Adam Scott's good odds there too, but Niemann, definitely a player. Everyone was high on him last week. He's starting to play a bit better. He's got that approach game that can really get fire. He just needs to have a good putting week. I think plus 3,500, very fair odds. And you're getting better odds on him than, say, a guy like Corey Connors, who I think very comparable players. But, Corey Connors is plus 22 versus plus 3,500.
All right, Robert Streb is plus 7,000. He's the defending champ and 2-time winner here.
Wow.
I mean, normally I just kind of laugh this off. I mean, Robert Streb is playing pretty well, though. It is kind of all putter based. I mean, Robert Streb, when he won here last year, and this is the second time he won this event. So, a pretty good win player. Again, another player who plays classic course as well. He nearly won at the Greenbrier, another sort of shortish classic setup earlier in his career as well. But he's really just riding a hot putter right now. He's gained over 2.5 strokes putting in each of his last 3 starts. So I think you're getting just, in deflated odds is what I guess you'd say. That sentiment, they're looking at his course history and they say, oh, well, he's putting well, he's playing well too. I just don't really trust that Robert Streb plus 7,000 going to be able to do it again. Again, this is a wide open event. The course brings in a ton of different styles. So I think if you're really interested in a player at higher odds, you go down further. You go down to a guy like Luke List. Adam Hadwin at plus 10,000 is really interesting. That's another player who can get really hot with the putter. Go down even further. I mean, you've got guys like, Cam Davis has won earlier in the year on tour at plus 13,000. So Zach Johnson, another veteran player, plus 13,000, could easily get hot here. So Robert Streb, just too short for me. He's playing well, so I get why the odds have gone down a little bit over what they probably should be, but I just don't trust that he's going to put like a fourth good putting week in a row in here.
We'll get you out of here with this Slater Proof pick. Who is going to be winning this week? Home of the Spanish Moss.
So I really like Alex Noren here at plus 3,500. He just kind of ticks all the boxes. He's a veteran player, very, very good putter. Again, one of the top 5 in the world. Very good short game. He's kind of like the Swedish Webb Simpson in a lot of ways. He just doesn't win as often as Webb Simpson, but he's played this event twice. He's finished top 20 here twice. He's got really fair odds, I think, a plus 3,500. He's played a bit in the fall here. So I think Alex Noren is going to be my slate approved there at plus 3,500.
All right, Jeff, thank you. That's a show.
Yes.
We are done. Madden starting at noon. The slate is going to be on at 5 p.m., and we will be back tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. for another edition of The Sweat. I'm here tomorrow. So
let's go.
We'll see you guys tomorrow morning at 11 a.m.